What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Northeast Scene. This is Keith.
And Tommy.
How's everybody doing? Welcome to another virtual episode. We may not be able to go outside, but we can still bring you the show on Skype. And today, we have a very, very special guest. Now, this is someone we planned to interview. We were all going to get together. Our friend was getting married. Sadly, that event has been canceled due to the coronavirus. But as I said in the last episode, the show must go on. So, please welcome a very good friend of ours, accomplished musician, accomplished chess player, all-around wonderful person, Vadim Taver.
Ew. Mathematician. Add that to the list. Mathematician.
And mathematician.
I don't know about accomplished.
Vadim, how's it going?
It's great, guys. Great to talk to you.
Yes, thanks so much for being on the show. We're really looking forward to this. So I'm going to jump right into it. The question we like to ask everybody, Vadim, tell us how you first got into hardcore and some of the bands and the shows that made an initial impression on you.
It's a great question. So I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia from second grade, basically from when we moved to the United States, my family from Ukraine, and then until high school, early high school. And I had a next door neighbor. His name is Brian Kantorek. He goes by BK. He's a Philly dude. He used to play in a band called Ubisunt. And he kind of introduced me to the whole thing. I'm like 4 years younger than him, which now doesn't make any difference whatsoever, but like back then it was such a big thing because I was in middle school and here's this high school kid next door and he plays guitar and like, he's so cool. He took me to a bunch of local shows that they played, and then he also took me to a big hardcore show that they opened at Beaver College in Philadelphia, and that was with H2O when they were just playing their first album, and then a band called Bound, which is Jason Shevchuk before he was in Kid Dynamite, and then Step Ahead, which had Dave House, before Loved Ones and Pain in Black and stuff, and then like Fury of Five played and stuff. I don't really remember anything about most of the bands, to be honest with you, except for Ubisunt and Step Ahead and H2O, because Brian made me a mixtape that had the first H2O record on one side of the cassette and then the Ashes full length on the other side of the cassette, and I was like, I just would go crazy for those. But he got me into everything. I think he first zoned in on the fact that I liked Rage Against the Machine. He knew I was like this little like MTV kid, and he knew I liked Nirvana, and so like he made me a mix that had like Inside Out, because that was Zach, and he like typed up all the information for me. It had like Faith No More on it and some Slayer, but then he threw in like Gorilla Biscuits into there, and he would like sneak in 108 and all this kind of stuff. So he is definitely 100% responsible for getting me into hardcore, and I just slowly kind of grew into there especially when I moved to Bucks County at the end of 1996.
Cool. Yeah, Inside Out was one of my gateway bands too, and they're a good one because everyone liked Rage Against the Machine, so it's like, hey, here's this guy's other band.
Yeah, and it's funny because musically right away I was like, yes, this is so heavy, this is great, but then like the screaming, I think you mentioned it in one of your earlier episodes, it takes a little bit of time to really get used to how aggressive the screaming is. Even though Zach like screamed a little bit in Rage, he didn't scream like nearly as much as like how he did in Inside Out, but after a while it was just like, yes, this rules.
Exactly.
Was Ubisunt the Pete Buckley's band too?
Yeah, so that's what I was going to mention, how everything sort of came back around, because that band Ubisunt, Brian got me into the band. He was the guitar player, and then also this guy Colin played guitar too. And by the way, both of those guys went on to be in a band called Go for the Throat, which were like really, really great Philadelphia band. But the singer of Ubisunt, his name is Pete Buckley. He ended up starting the Philly record label Break Even Records that put out the first This Day Forward album. So it's kind of so funny how all that came around, because I knew Pete years and years and years before everybody else in This Day Forward did, before he released the record. I knew him at least like 3 or 4 years before everybody else.
Wow. See, I only knew him as the Break Even guy, so that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, because he did the first Audience of One and the first This Day Forward and the first A Life Once Lost.
Yeah, that's right. And it's sort of funny. I felt like he should have been an alumni of Neshaminy High School or something, because he was just like releasing like every band Neshaminy put out. You know, Bossena too, because they were from our school. Yeah.
So, were you in any band? Now, I first met you when A Life Once Lost formed and started playing shows. Had you been in any bands in the area before that?
I was. Nothing really crazy. There was one band that was really funny called Dislike, and we played a couple shows at the Trihampton YMCA with like some of the hardcore bands. Like we played with Scarred for Life, Mike Migliacci's old band, and then we played with Makeshift, which was Colin's old band. So it's kind of funny. Like we did share a stage with those guys, but we were definitely like sort of like on the fringe of, I guess, what you would call like punk hardcore music, you know. But yeah, that A Life Once Lost was really the first band that I took incredibly seriously as far as like trying to play out all the time. And so you saw like my first, like, I guess I would call like my first like real band that played out and did all that kind of stuff.
Right. So let's talk about the initial formation of A Life Once Lost. Now, I remember, I don't think I knew you at all before that, or TJ or Rich or anybody in the initial lineup, but I heard Bob Meadows was going to be fronting a band. Now, everyone knew Bob because he booked shows in the area, so I remember just thinking, oh, Bob's going to be in a band. Oh, that's wild. And then I think I met all you guys maybe at your first show, which may have been at Doug's house, the famed Doug Stock, which was cut short. So how did the band come together? Like, how did you decide? Like, how did the initial members come together? How did that start?
Man, I'm actually glad you asked that story, because it's it's such a Bucks County story. So one of some of the local legends around late 90s, like 97, 98, were this band called Lifesick Life.
Yes.
Who was a really popular band, and then Suburban Hoods. And Suburban Hoods I've seen open like really big hardcore shows, even though that oftentimes they were in Bucks County, like it just kind of seemed like maybe they were like the draw or whatever. But they've played a few, like they played with like Better Than 1,000 and 10 Yard Fight, and I've seen them a bunch. So Lifesick Life were playing their final show at the Levittown YMCA. They were breaking up, and that was a show with Lifesick Life and Suburban Hoods. So I was like, oh, of course I'm going to go to that show. This is in the summer of 1998. And I didn't really know those guys at all, aside from just seeing them play live. And after the show ended, like Lifesick Life headlined, they finished their set, we're done. Luke still has his drum set up. Luke Carmen was the drummer of Lifesick Life. And
Yes.
then I'm just hanging around, as teenagers do when shows are over. and this kid sits down on Luke's drums and starts playing. And he's like killing it on the drums. He's like this like little like scrawny dude, like no more than 13 years old, which, by the way, I found out he was 13 years old.
Wow.
And this is TJ DeBlois. And like at 13 years old, he was already just amazing. Like I just look at this dude and like, me being me, I'm like, I got to talk to this dude. I need to start a band with this guy. That's it. That was like mission.
That's a perfect opportunity. Yes.
So he got off the drums, and I found out, I guess he knew Luke. I don't know, maybe he took like even a drum lesson from him or something. It wasn't like he just like randomly sat down on his kit, but just that him sitting down on Luke's kit is the reason for me coming up to him. And I would never have known this guy or known he played drums. So I was like, hey man, what's up? And he was actually with Rich Arnold. So it was the three of us. We all met on the same day. We took a walk to Taco Bell and made plans to get together in TJ's mom's basement and write some music. And that's basically how it started. It was the three of us. I brought on this one guitar player from Neshaminy that kind of didn't really work out. And then Doug had moved my junior year of high school. He was a sophomore. So it's still 98. And I met him. I guess I just kind of like saw him in the halls and he looked like a metal dude that I should be friends with. So I brought him on because I found out he played guitar. So it was the four of us, and we were jamming a bunch of songs for a little while. And then we had a show booked. So it was like your typical, like Keith, you know all about this, like booking the show before you have a band.
Yeah.
You know, situation.
Yeah, and you know, another thing I would do, but I didn't know how shit worked back then, so I would just email bands and invite them to play shows I didn't even book. Like just crazy stuff like that.
So this was a straight phone call because I knew there was a show happening at the Lansdowne Friends School in Pennsylvania, and This Day Forward and Audience of One were actually playing the show. So I got this dude,
Lansdowne.
Lansdowne Friends School. So I called that dude. His name was BJ, just off of a flyer or something. And I was like, "Hey, dude, you don't know me, but like you're doing this show, and like all our friends are playing. I swear, please put us on the show." Just like
that dude had a band.
What's your band name?
Fire Down Below. That dude.
Yeah, Fire Down Below.
That dude, BJ. I remember
exactly.
that. Hilarious.
Exactly. So he, was actually really nice, and this is back when like hardcore shows already had like 9 or 10 bands, and he's like, "Sure, why not? Let's add a fucking 17th band to the show. Why not?" So that was first a Life Once Lost show, but we didn't have a singer. So when we had this show approaching, we were like, okay, let's get our shit together. Like, we need to figure it out. And we actually got together with Mike Migliacci a few times. He was the original A Life Once Lost singer, but I think it was before we were even using the name A Life Once Lost. And then as a week before the show or something, he lets us know, "Oh, I'm not going to be able to make it." And we're like, "Oh my God, you got to be kidding me. Like, what the fuck are we going to do?" So I had met Bob earlier that summer through a mutual friend. We went to see Converge and Boy Sets Fire at the Stalag, which was my first Stalag show. And we got to talking about music and stuff. And like you said, I think he already did a couple shows. He wasn't really doing shows like regularly at that time. He may have done like 1 or 2 Palanca Park shows.
Yeah.
And then I think that one church in Bensalem, but he definitely wasn't doing shows regularly at that point. But I called him up and I was like, "Hey Bob, so, I have a band, we're doing the show, our singer kind of bailed. Do you have any interest?" And so he came to practice. I think he practiced with us maybe once, like literally one time. And he had, I remember, lyrics just like on sheets of paper.
Yeah.
And then we played the show, and he had the sheets of paper that he was holding like while he was screaming. Like it was like like it wasn't like a music stand. Like he was literally
just
like
holding pieces
like
of paper.
Screaming. Yeah. Like I don't even know if they were printed or if they were written out, but that was the first A Life Once Lost show. It was just, there's a video of it somewhere. My friend filmed it. I don't know at all where it is, but I remember that Rich and I were both wearing straight edge shirts, and mine particularly said Feasterville Straight Edge. I remember making that, and it's so silly to like look back on that now. But yeah, that was how A Life Once Lost began. That was the start of it.
Yeah, I remember when that band started, and it was, we knew this. I knew This Day Forward and Mike Shaw and Pat McCormick and that band. Those guys got me into hardcore, and This Day Forward was kind of my baseline. So A Life Once Lost was the next band that popped up of people that I knew, and I remember thinking like, whoa, like, because This Day Forward, when they first got together, was pretty straight ahead hardcore, and when I saw A Life Once Lost, I was like, oh man, these guys are like really bringing it, because it was like more metallic, and there was a little more like finger picking and like tricks with guitar and a little more technical prowess. So I was like, wow, these guys are really bringing it. And I just remember the live shows being great, and there was kind of, now when that band initially, This Day Forward and A Life Once Lost were friends. They would play gigs together. Their first tour, quote unquote, was together. Remember the weekend up in northern New York? I think it was Albany and somewhere else.
Yeah, can I interject just for 1 second?
Yes.
Because I was just telling Katie about that weekend, because this was on. I think you're a year older than me, right? But this was on my winter break senior year.
Yeah.
Mine and Gary's, because we were the babies in This Day Forward and A Life Once Lost, we were in the same year. But that winter weekend tour was like our first experience of being on the road, and the two bands together plus all of our friends, I remember I was telling Katie how we stayed in this one house in Wilkes-Barre after our show at the home base, and how you guys just kept doing that one joke that
the bubbly.
Everyone would just, you were doing the come in here for some I can't even do it, like with the
rich guy voice, like, oh, some bubbly for me and my friends. And we kept doing it,
and we were trying. After a while, we were trying to fall asleep. Everyone's like, okay, this joke's been going on because every time someone would say something, it would be really funny, and everyone starts laughing, and we're all crammed into this one room. There's 15 bodies on the ground trying to sleep. And then every now and then someone would still bust out with the voice and people would laugh. And this is 3 a.m, 4 a.m, or everyone. And then I think at one point it was either you or Pat, and you did the voice, and Doug just got up and just started pounding.
Yeah.
Just shut the fuck up. We're trying to sleep.
That was me. Doug got up and ran across the room and punched me in the head. And then I think I may have stopped it. I don't know if I did.
My recollection though was it was in the dark.
It was complete black
because everyone it was already lights out and everyone's just trying to go to bed, and I just hear someone get up, run across the room, and just start pounding on you shut the fuck up.
Was this the tour when the wheel fell off the van too?
No, that's not. That was the end of the end tour.
Okay,
we can get to that later.
Yeah. So that was both bands' first tour experience. I remember those shows being a lot of fun, and so tell us about the writing of the first A Life Once Lost record. Now, I remember being in the studio when Bob was recording vocals for it, and he was going back and forth with Vince, trying to find the right tones, and just tell us about some of the history going into that album. Now, I remember Rob from Loudnet, he put out that first record, right?
Yeah, so we did a demo first. We did 5 songs with Vince at Skylight, and one of the songs, funny enough, had Anthony on backup vocals, which was completely just unplanned. I'm pretty sure he just happened to show up at the studio and we just had him scream. I don't even think he had any set vocal patterns or anything. He just would just do random shit, and we're like, cool, we'll have a second singer. Because you guys, you did an All Else Failed interview, and having 2 singers in the band seemed like the hot shit. So we're like, oh, let's have a track with 2 singers just completely not working with each other.
That was the last song on the demo, right? That Anthony was on.
I don't remember the sequence, but we felt comfortable with Vince, and so we went back there. Rob from Loudnet reached out that he was going to help pay for the recording. I don't really remember how much we spent on it, but we did our music there. As far as writing the music, to be honest with you, if I'm gonna be completely real, I mean, we were just ripping off Converge and some Dillinger, and you know what I mean. There was no structure to any of those songs. If I go back and listen to it now, it's almost comical to me, and I'm sorry, for people that like that shit or listen to it, but I mean, it's A Life Once Lost became a much better band after I left, because that early stuff, it was just riff after riff after riff, just part after part, and there's no cohesiveness.
Right.
A lot of times there's not even transitions. It would just be okay, let's play this fucking part, and then all right, TJ, now count off.
1, 2, 3, 4, next part.
Yeah, and then next part. It doesn't fit whatsoever, so most of that shit was written like that. It was oh, I've got 17 new riffs, okay, let's throw 10 of them together into one song without any sort of
there's nothing cohesive about it. It's just everything was just thrown together. You can hear it though when you listen to it. There's times where it's just you hear it and you just go, why is this stopping? And then a breakdown comes out of nowhere and you're like, all right, what is it?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I went back and listened to one of the old songs. I don't remember, but it literally, TJ just keeps counting off new parts. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 part. 1, 2, 3, 4 part. It's
And that's what you do when you're 16, 17 years old,
exactly,
writing metal music from Converge. At least they knew some songwriting. They would go back to parts, or they would have motifs and things, but still they're responsible, I think, for all these bands just writing ridiculous music that's just one way. Like, you just start at part A and then you end at part Z, and none of the shit in the middle like goes together at all.
Right. But
that's a life once lost when I was in the band, honestly.
And I remember having this discussion with you because you guys were way more metal, and I remember being like, "You guys are metal," and you'd be like, "No, man, we're not. We're hardcore."
Yeah,
I think there was like a struggle.
I was definitely in hardcore land.
Yeah.
I was like in fucking hardcore La La Land, because I was like, you refuse to accept that, like, okay, you have blast beats and you have finger tapping. That's not metal. we're hardcore.
Exactly. So tell us about how. I don't actually know this. I remember it happening, though. How did you end up in This Day Forward? Did they approach you? Did you approach them? How did that conversation start?
All right, so I was already friends with all the guys in This Day Forward. We actually were much closer than the guys in A Life Once Lost. Like over a period of time, I became much closer. Like hanging out at the Shaw House, as you guys know.
Yes,
that was a big spot and everything. What had happened was, it was the summer of 2000. It was like June. So Transient had just been recorded. I think Transient was recorded in May, and I didn't record guitar on that record. I was there for a bunch of it. Like, I was there for the recording sessions. I think I did backups on a few of the songs with everybody, gang vocals and whatnot, but I wasn't in the band. But I was working at Taco Bell, and I was working the drive-thru, I remember, and I get like I think it was either a phone call like to Taco Bell, or someone showed up, because this is before, cell phones, obviously.
Yeah,
so either someone showed up, maybe Gary, and talked to me, or I got a phone call like straight to the store, which used to happen all the time. I would just get phone calls to Taco Bell. Can I talk to Vadim?
Sure.
And they said, hey, we have a show later tonight in Long Island, and Randy can't make it. And it was like a big show. It was with like Sky Came Falling, who was like really big in Long Island at the time, and like 12 Tribes, and I think maybe even Poison the Well, actually. And they're like, hey, could you fill in for Randy? I was like, well, I've never played any of your songs before, but I could give it a shot. And so literally I learned 4 or 5 songs, I think, on the drive up to the show. We took like a little carpool or whatever. So I played the first show with This Day Forward in June of 2000, never having played with the band. The first time I ever played with the band was the show.
Yeah.
No practice or anything.
How did you learn it? Like, how did you learn? Did you just play it on the stereo and like figure it out as you're going up?
Yeah, and I actually did that another time with the band Taken in 2002, because their guitar player got stuck and couldn't make it into Canada. So I ended up learning like 5 or 6 of their songs also, like in the back of the van.
Wow.
And played 2 sets, played This Day Forward and a Taken set in Canada. But yeah, like the This Day Forward thing was just kind of, so at that point, like, I don't think that they were planning on replacing Randy. But I think there was always a little bit of a question of him just not really like fitting in so much with them as people, because Golan was the one that brought Randy on. He was good friends with him in school, but Randy was more like a Fat Records, Epitaph Records, like punk kid,
yes,
sort of.
Yes.
Not really so much like a hardcore kid. So anyway, A Life Once Lost did a full, not full US. We did a US tour with some Canada with a band called The End from Toronto in July. So this was like right after that first show I played with This Day Forward.
Right.
And at the end of that tour, as Tommy like briefly mentioned, what happened was our van, we were driving on the I-90 by Rochester, New York, and our front wheel falls off, like just comes off on the highway. And I was in the passenger seat when this happened. I remember like looking out the window and seeing the wheel rolling parallel to the van and thinking like, oh shit, because you just hear like, we heard something happen, and then you see the axle is just scraping right on the ground. Actually, wait a minute, I'm sorry, it was the passenger back rear wheel, not the front wheel, but I saw it rolling alongside on the highway.
Oh my God.
And so we got towed And TJ and I flew home, and then the other guys happened to get picked up by Scarm and driven home. But we left this van in Rochester, New York, with all of our gear because we had nothing better to do. You know, we were broke. And then This Day Forward had a show in Syracuse in July, literally 3 weeks later or whatever. And so what ended up happening was I got driven to, or maybe I drove my car to Rochester. I picked up as much of my gear as I possibly could, and we left that van at the Firestone, just abandoned it because we didn't have any money to get it fixed or whatever. But I was able to get all that gear. I played on that gear with This Day Forward. That was the second show I played with This Day Forward with the recovered A Life Once Lost gear.
Wow.
In Syracuse, which was supposed to be with Glassjaw and Every Time I Die, who both canceled. Huh. Here's this huge show with, but then, we still ended up playing with some locals that were cool, like Sparklights the Friction.
So funny story. Just about when I found out the car was the van had broken down, I came home from work, and at the time I was washing dishes at that old folks home over in Holland. And I remember I came home and my mom literally had written down on a piece of paper, she was like, yeah, Doug called, wheel fell off the van, he needs you to come and pick him up. And I was like, where? And she's like, he said he's in Rochester. And I literally started laughing, and she was like, well, are you going? I was like, are you out of your fucking mind? I was like, I'm not leaving right now. And the worst part was is in my head, all I thought of was the week before you guys had left, Meadows came over to my house and was like, hey, there's that auto body place near your house. We need to go and grab some tires from there. And I was like, okay. And we go there, and remember Bob used to have that old maroon Nissan Sentra. It was all dented up and So he goes over there with me, and we're driving through, and I'm like, all right, cool. And he literally just hops out of the car with the tire iron and just starts taking a tire off the back of this other van. And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, all right. So, the guys, the place is clearly open. I'm like, all right, Bob has something set up with it. He grabs the tire and picks it up, and I remember he starts rolling it towards me. He's like, get in a car. And I'm like, oh, my God. Are you out of your mind? Are we stealing this right now? And then in my head, as soon as I read that message, when my mom was like, yeah, the tire fell off the van, I was like, I bet we stole the wrong size tire, and it ended up ruining the back axle on the van.
Wow.
I don't know what it was, but either way, we got lucky, I guess, because the last show of that tour was in Albany, New York, and it was with Drop Dead and somebody else. It was this I think it was this crusty show, grindcore show that somehow Life Lost got onto. So some of our friends were already coming to that show in upstate New York, and even though Albany and Rochester aren't super close together, we already had friends that were coming up, and that's why they were able to give the other three guys a ride home. But TJ and I flew to that tiny airport in Trenton. Somehow we were able to get airfare and fly home,
Wow.
But the gear was picked up later. The gear was picked up for that This Day Forward show. So I think after that show is when the guys talked about it, and maybe they approached me. I don't even remember exactly how it happened, but it was most likely Golan that said hey, we want you to play with us. Randy's kind of going to be out of the picture eventually. And I knew Randy from school and stuff. I did feel a little bit bad about that, but at the same time I kind of knew that he wasn't really fitting the band, and also there was the excitement of playing with my friends, I always really liked This Day Forward. I was at that first show at Shaw House too, and they were a really great band, so I was going to attempt to do both bands at the same time, and so that was the case for 3 months. It was I was playing in both bands. We were still doing local shows.
Uh-huh.
And then in October of 2000, we were practicing at Doug's house, writing some new material. And he, if we're going to be real, he hit me with an ultimatum pretty much. He was just like, this isn't going to work out with you being in both bands. And that's when I was pretty much like, okay, well, fuck you. I'll talk to you later. And I got my gear and I left, and I made the decision to just be in This Day Forward, because no one's going to tell me who I can and can't play music with. And also the environment of A Life Once Lost at the time was not a healthy environment. It was very negative. There was a lot of violence at the shows, not just from the attendees, but also from the people within the band. And I wasn't getting along with some of the guys. And so given the choice, if you're going to put me in that choice, am I going to be in a band with dudes who I consider my best friends? Or am I going to stay in this band that is like a negative, violent, unhappy environment? Even though I started that band, it was like a no-brainer. I was just like, peace.
Understood. I remember a lot of those early shows, and let's just say there were certain members of the band I would not stand anywhere near while they played, because I didn't want to lose an arm or a head.
To be honest with you, I always hated that shit. Like I'm all about stage presence. Like I do get that it's fun to watch bands. Like you love All Else Failed. Like they do have violent shows sometimes like that too. But like I also don't want people that come to see our music to be scared that they're gonna get hit just for standing there and trying to watch. And like on purpose, that's like one thing. I'm going off. I'm losing my mind because the music is so emotional and so heavy. That's one thing. But then like to purposely go and like swing your instruments or just like try to punch people like that are just trying to watch you play music like that. That's just some kind of immature shit that I just didn't really want to be a part of. There's
a certain way to do it where you can be really into it and really interacting with the crowd, but also being safe. And I think All Else Failed are a good example of how they do that. But back to A Life Once Lost, I remember you joining This Day Forward, and it just seemed like a natural fit. Like you were mentioning, Randy was kind of an outlier, and he was good. He was a nice person. I didn't know him that well, but he was a nice person. But when you fit, it just seemed like, oh yeah, this is the logical choice. And I remember I think the first time I saw you play with the band, Vadim, was the record release for Transit.
So that was the third show. So I told you about the first show was in Long Island, second show was in Syracuse, and then my third show was the Transient record release show at the Kill Time, which was November of 2000.
And that was a legendary show. I still remember it. Tons of people, just all around good time. And I remember even Randy was in the crowd singing along, and it was just like a really surreal moment.
Yeah, that was an awesome show.
Vadim, your memory is impeccable. Every time you mention something, you're like, oh yeah, that was late November of, and I'm like, holy shit, I don't remember any of this stuff. I'm so glad you guys were able to do that. Like, that's an unbelievable skill.
It's not as strong anymore, I promise you that.
So, your first experience, now I've been in this situation where I join a band that exists, and for me, I was just always in a rush to write new material, because I'm like, I want to be a part of this. I want to write stuff and to be a part of it and have people hear it. So was your first experience writing with This Day Forward Kairos?
Yeah. So Kairos was interesting because that was the first time when I felt like I was really writing songs with a hardcore band. Like, there was a little bit more focus on transitions, which, was very smart to do because I think it made the songs like much more cohesive. And then also trying to stray away from just playing like your chugga breakdowns, which it still had some of that, but I feel like they were put into the songs a little bit. What's the right word I'm looking for?
Intentional?
Like,
they were like
more tasteful.
Yeah, like sparingly, and also so that they fit a little bit better with like the part they were coming from, or like there's needs to be a reason why it's there, right? It's not just like, hey, let's just throw in this breakdown, which is kind of like how a lot of bands would write at the time. And I think that was a little bit of a conscious effort on the band to try to make them a little bit like more cohesive songs, because This Day Forward had way more cohesiveness than early A Life Once Lost, but even they too were sort of like some weird parts that don't really fit together, like weird part after part,
Yes.
But yeah, like for the Kairos experience, I definitely brought in a bunch of the riffs, and then helped a lot with transitions, and then like adding leads and things like that. Like I was pretty involved right away with the writing process.
And that came across, I had this conversation with Mike Shaw when he was on. I remember seeing the first This Day Forward show where you played Kairos material live, and I was like, holy shit, like they are taking it to the next level. This is something I have not seen before. So when in that experience coming into the band and writing, was there any tension or like, no, this isn't the way we do things, or anything difficult to navigate?
Not really. I do remember that I think I was probably the one that wanted more breakdowns at the time. Because again, I told you, like, I was kind of like I was in like hardcore La La Land for a long time. And I think it was really Colin. Colin's always kind of like ahead of everybody. But he was the one that's like, I think we should tone it down with the open E chugs or whatever. Like, and of course he was right. So yeah, like, I mean, that was the only thing. I think there's certain points where I remember being like, actually, you know what? We were gonna, it was always going to be a 5-song EP. We knew we were going to do an EP, but we were going to re-record one of the songs from Fragments originally. That was the case. And I think we tried. I think it was maybe Dead Acres, but one of those early songs we were gonna like sort of like update and redo, but then like Allegory of the Cave, which was the 4th track on Kairos, sort of just like it just came together like really quick, and that's the song that has like a chug breakdown at the end. And I remember thinking like, yes, we got a chug part, like that was like the one on the record that made it, that had the chug part.
Yeah. So what tell me about some of your experiences in the band. Now you always seem like you always seem like one of the more business-oriented people in the band. Like, you took it seriously. I remember This Day Forward would have to cancel gigs sometimes, and you just would not be happy about it because it would happen maybe too often, and you seem to have a lot of networking skills. You knew tons of people. That kind of seemed to be your role in the band. Am I on point there?
Colin was definitely more the business guy, especially later on when we were on labels and had management and that kind of thing and booking agencies. He was way more business oriented than I was. I think maybe what you're thinking of, you're definitely right. I didn't like canceling shows. I really hated that. But I think more so than anything, that was probably because I just was very social and I just wanted to like see people from out of town. And then another part of it was probably because I was doing a bunch of our booking. Like I took on, it's weird. Like I kind of like jumped into This Day Forward and started taking like a pretty active role fairly quickly. But I ended up like, I was doing all the merch, the mail order. I was answering like a bunch of the emails, and then I started taking over booking. So until This Day Forward got picked up by Flower Booking, which was like when we were already on Equal Vision, I pretty much booked almost all of our shows locally, and then some tours. I was booking our tours as well. So maybe the cancellation thing also was just more of a frustration on my end. Like I took, because this isn't like a simple like, hey, let's make a call on my cell phone or send a text or whatever. Like this was a lot of going back and forth by email and sometimes instant messenger, and then like nailing down specifics, and like, there was more work that went into it, right, booking than can be accomplished nowadays. You
don't want to be a band that gets a reputation as canceling, because then it's harder to get booked.
Yeah, for sure. And so that was probably what you're thinking. But as far as business goes, I mean, we were just kind of like silly a lot, and we'd do dumb shit. Like I think you talked with Mike about, I guess it didn't really matter as much then, but for CMJ, like how we all dressed up in these ridiculous costumes, and then we performed like in front of all these music execs and stuff, like Mike with his marching band outfit with a gorilla mask on. Yeah. And then, and then that, there's a photo of that ended up in Revolver magazine. So like, all right, so here's This Day Forward with their singer in a fucking like gorilla mask, like that's the level of seriousness that you had in the band. And like, Colin was definitely the one that was trying to get us to be a little bit more professional and just not like do shit like that. It wasn't me as much as him. Yeah. So tell us about your mindset going into the last record in response. Did you think, okay, we're on Equal Vision, like this is it, or tell us about some of your experiences there. Okay, well that's like a big jump from Kairos, but in that time, we had brought Brendan on board completely amicably. Like obviously, like Mike Golan is like one of the originators of the band. He was like the heart of the band. really, I think I'm in the band mainly because of Mike. Like, him and I were like inseparable at the time, but he had school going on, and he, Mike was very future driven for his career. So we kind of had to make that change just for the band to move forward. And that was definitely like something that Golan was very supportive of. So we got Brendan, and for In Response, that's already when we were like touring all the time, and pretty much the band has taken over the majority of our lives. We didn't really have outside jobs, that even though we weren't really making much money off of This Day Forward, but still you would come home from tour, and we were fortunate that we were able to stay with our families. We didn't have rent. If we had to pay rent, it wouldn't have worked out, but the fact that we were all living at home, I think it made it feasible. So for In Response particularly, it was so different than the way we did anything before, because we wrote that album over the course of like 3 months, practicing like 4 to 5 times a week. I mean, it was a job. Like that's really what it was. We would come in about noon to Colin's parents' basement. We would meet at his house, and this is like a Monday through Friday thing. And then we would play until probably about 4 or 5 p.m. every day. We'd take a break sometimes and go to Brothers Pizza or like hang out upstairs. But that was the writing process for In Response. It was like, it's funny because that album, I feel like, separated a lot of our fans. And if you heard anybody in This Day Forward talk about the career, like that's the album that we all talk about, that we're most proud of, because clearly to us, that is the best record, like in terms of songwriting, in terms of like how much time we put into it, how much thought was put into it. It's like night and day if you put those two records, In Response and Transient, to each other, but they're just different. They're different kinds of records. Transient is definitely much more of like a chaotic, like metalcore album, lots of screaming, lots of like anger and aggression. And In Response it's like a more crafted version of that. It still has the anger, but it has like a lot of beauty with it, and it's unique. Like I still put on that record and I'd say like, okay, well, there's not a lot of bands that really sounded like what we were doing at the time, but we were just, some of our influences as well. I mean, we, like Mike mentioned, like, he got really into At the Drive-In and their vocal delivery, and, we were listening to Refused and Sunny Day Real Estate and that kind of stuff. So we try to bring all of that to the table, but that writing process, that was brutal. I mean, we would spend so much time putting those songs together, making sure everything flowed into each other. Everybody brought parts. There was a lot of stuff that was cut. Mm-hmm. But I've still to this day have never written a record with that much. I mean, maybe the Marigold record over time took a long time as well, but this was like all of us getting together daily, hours at a time, crafting these songs.
Right. And I separated the This Day Forward discography. Like if I'm in the mood for like hardcore and I want to like punch myself in the face, it's Transient. Kairos is the bridge, and then In Response is like you mentioned, it's the cohesive album. It stands on its own, and that's kind of how I separate the discography.
I feel like it's the album that I also consistently go back to more. Like, it's not the, like, I'll go back and listen to things off of Transient where I'll go like, oh, great, like Kissing Perfection's Cheek or something like that. But like, In Response is the album that I consistently go, I can put this on and listen to it all the way through.
Right. Now, quite a good question Tommy brought up earlier when we were prepping. You got involved more vocally with Kairos and with In Response. Tell us how that came about. Did you say like, hey, I have these parts and I want to do backups, or was it a natural thing? Tell us about that.
I think it's not me. I think it was the band asked me to, because they knew that I had sing. I don't remember who, but I think, yeah, that was a conscious decision that I remember that was discussed, that they wanted to have some clean singing. And so in Kairos, it's not that present. It's only in Sunfalls and Watershine, where I went and picked up Jeff from upstate New Jersey and then brought him back to the studio, and then like that was like literally like an all day driving back and forth. But we knew we wanted to have him on the record, and he really wanted to be a part of it. But that's the only song I sang in Kairos. In response, yeah, there was definitely a lot more backups, and a lot of those backups were written in the studio, because Mike didn't even have a lot of the lyrics completed.
Yeah, and I listened to Kairos again recently, and it just, I appreciate it even more now. Just the addition of your vocals brought a whole new awesome element to it, and just the songwriting was such a major leap forward, and I was just like, holy shit, this was good. I almost cried. I listened to Sun Falls and Watershine, and I almost cried. I was like, fuck, these guys have to play a show again. But we'll badger you about that later.
Okay.
So tell us...
I knew you would.
Tell us about... I want to hear your experience about the end of the band. Now, this is going to be a two-part question. One, Mike Shaw mentioned a mysterious thing that happened in Iowa, and he wouldn't tell us what it was. He said that's when he decided the band was going to end. So he wouldn't tell us what it was, so we're going to ask you. If you don't want to tell us, that's okay. And two, just tell us about how the conversation started, that it was going to end, and just how you processed that. Because this band was your guys' lives. This was everything. So it's a major change to go from that to the next thing, which we don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, that was a shock coming to me, to be honest with you. So I don't know specifically what you're talking about. Is it Iowa or Idaho? I'm not really sure.
So we asked him what brought about the end of This Day Forward, and he paused for a solid 4 or 5 seconds, and then all he said was one word, was Iowa. And then he paused again, and we were like, do you want to talk about that more? And he looked up, and again, huge pause, and went, no. Just single word answer. No, I'm not talking about that.
I don't remember. Honestly, I don't know when it started, but it definitely started with Mike and Colin before everybody else. I'm pretty sure that they had some conversations about it between them before everybody sat down with it, because the first time that I got the message was that conversation with everybody, it was on the Shadows Fall tour, which that tour wasn't going that great for us. I mean, it was okay, but maybe not as good as we would have liked it to be. And that was a few tours, there was a few tours where we were playing across the country, and it's the third time we're back at the city or whatever, and we're still not really drawing a lot of people. There was always some people, but it wasn't we weren't pulling 100 people every night, especially in the Midwest and things like that. So on that tour with Shadows Fall, we had a meeting in the van. I think it was after the show, and yeah, I think Colin or Mike or both of them together kind of said that, yeah, we think that this is going to be a good time for the band to sort of come to an end. We're not really getting where we want to be. We're putting everything into it, and it's just, for whatever reason, is not really catching on. I'm sure there was other factors for everybody involved. I can't speak on their behalves, but for me, I would have kept the band going indefinitely. I had no plan to finish and to do something else at that point. So for me, it was definitely a shock. I was like, holy shit, this whole thing that I've just invested 4 years of my life into is going to come to an end, especially when everything in your life is invested into it. You know what I mean? Like the van, the music gear, the absence of relationships back home, just being away all the time. Because that last year in 2003, we were on tour 9 months out of that year, literally 9 months on the road.
Wow.
Can sort of wear on you. And that's because we were just trying to get exposure. We just put out this album that we're very proud of, on a label that we're very proud of. We're getting tours, they're putting us on these packages with other bands that should in theory be good, but doesn't really seem to be gaining steam for whatever reason. And so that's kind of how it came up. And we did have other tours that were already booked. And so we had to decide, are we going to still play the remainder of our shows, the remainder of our commitments, or are we just going to call it now? And we finished up all the tours. There was only one tour offer that we had that we said no because we didn't fully confirm to it yet, and that was with Stretch Armstrong and The Bled, and we decided, like, that we weren't going to do that tour. But we finished like maybe 2 more tours. We did one with Zayo and Beloved, and then I booked all of our last shows, which we did like 6 last shows altogether. They're on a poster. By the way, if anybody wants, I still have like a box of those posters. So if anybody wants This Day Forward show poster, I will mail you one if you just pay me for shipping.
Oh, dude.
Maybe one post.
Absolutely.
Maybe one post office are a little bit more safe to go to as well. But I have so many of those that I can send out to anybody that's interested.
We want to get out to you to catalog your many flyers and all that stuff too for the site. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll do that.
But let's talk about the final shows. I mean, where was your head at? Do you remember them? What'd you do later that night? Or are you like, holy shit, like this is it?
Yeah. Well, I remember them probably better than the other guys because I booked them. So I spent a lot of time with the promoters that were going to do them, because we decided, and this is when Suzanne from Flower was booking us, and she was a little bit upset that we decided we were going to just book our own shows without her. We were just going to do it ourselves. Because again, like, I used to do this before her. But yeah, I think it was something she was kind of unhappy with. But you have to understand, like, we just wanted everything done our way, like we've always been sort of like in a situation where we didn't have a lot of say in what happens or where things go. But for this particular thing, it was like, the band's coming to an end, it's going to be on our terms. And so we booked the shows with only the promoters that we felt comfortable with only the bands playing that we handpicked. So in that sense, it was like the best way to go out. Like, we did a Lancaster show at the Chameleon Club with Murder by Death, that Jeremy from CI did. Then we did New York City, and that was with like On the Might of Princess, and I can't remember. I think A Life Once Lost played that one with us too. We did a Jersey show with Unsound, who are We're All Broken, who Joe recorded in response, their drummer. And then with 12 Tribes, who were going under Prodigal Zoo, I think, at the time.
Right.
And Alexis on Fire did like the last few shows with us. Then there was a Ben Salem show that Steve from sometime in April did for us, and that was with all our friends. That was like Zoloft played that show, A Life Once Lost played that show. And then the last show at the First Unitarian in Philly that had like a Trunk Full of Dead Bodies, Tommy's band, and then Albert React, which was a band we were good friends with, and then Alexis on Fire and us. So yeah, we chose all the bands, all the venues with the promoters on our terms, and that's how the last shows were. I wish they didn't get shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, for those that don't know, the Palanca show ended early, which was the second time our show got shut down at Palanca Park. Like, what are the odds of that happening? But it was just because it was too crazy. There was too many people in that place. And then the Philly show, we had to cut our set short because the church double booked, and they had like some like actual church services that evening. So our show was sort of a matinee, and we had to wrap it up by a certain time to let like the church people in. We're like, oh my God. So yeah, we didn't get to play a full last set.
That's terrible. That's terrible.
It's okay though.
So yeah, so I didn't know I forgot A Life Once Lost played with you guys again, because I remember there was a kind of a division formed once you joined This Day Forward. Now, people were still friends and whatever, but there was kind of like an unspoken like division. Like A Life Once Lost never played with This Day Forward again, I guess, until the end, right?
No, we actually played a bunch together. We played on tour a few times together. We played a bunch of festivals together, and we did even do some local shows together. So we did still end up playing together quite a bit, and that's how, I mean, if we didn't play together, I wouldn't know, because I wouldn't go see them play live, but they did become a much better band after I left. That's what I was saying, like, in all honesty. Nick Frasca in the band, and Bob Carpenter, like, those guys are really good musicians, and they sounded like super awesome. You know, even Justin playing drums for them after TJ had left, like they did change a lot, but they were such a much tighter band, and we play with them all the time. I don't think that there was as much weirdness as you may think. Probably mostly with me and Doug.
Okay.
But with the other guys, I think it was mostly okay. From my perspective, I was like, whatever, you know. I moved on pretty quickly from that.
I got you. So now This Day Forward is over, and now I want to say something here, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but a long time ago when we were young, I don't know, 20, 21 years old, like during the last This Day Forward tour, and even before that, I just used to be like a really angry, kind of bitter dude. And I hated anything that was like a trend. I don't know, like you used to have really outspoken beliefs as that many hardcore kids had, like, you know, straight edge, veganism, this and that. And I would see that and be like, I hate that. That's stupid. Just because a lot of people were doing it. I don't know why. That was just my mindset at the time. It didn't make sense. And I don't even know if you picked up on it or not, but I was kind of hard on you. It was like a brotherly, like, rivalry thing. And I wasn't the nicest person to you. And after This Day Forward broke up, I lost touch with you. And I didn't make any attempt to reach out. I didn't check out any of your new bands. It was just like, we just didn't talk for a long time. And I don't know how we reconnected, but I'm really glad we did, because I consider you one of my best friends, and I'm really happy that we're in each other's lives still. So I just want to say that, you know, for my part, for all that stuff, I don't know what it was exactly, but I'm sorry, and I'm glad it's in the past.
I can't believe.
Oh, thanks, man. I honestly, I never like look back and think like, oh, Keith was a dick to me, so you didn't even have to say all that. But thanks anyway. And to be fair, I was definitely probably harder to get along with when I was super, like gung-ho vegan and gung-ho straight edge and all this stuff. I was probably way over the top with all of that shit. So you probably had a reason to give me crap. I don't take it personally.
So that now I want to get into some of the stuff you did right after This Day Forward, because I don't even know. Like, tell me about Marigold. How did that come together, and how quickly did it come together after This Day Forward?
Fairly quickly. So This Day Forward ended in December 2003, and then Marigold was basically going in February 2004. So like 2-month period, basically it got going. And the way that it started was a group of these guys who were This Day Forward fans went to see us towards the end of our run in Jersey somewhere. I think it was like Birch Hill nightclub or something like that. And they came up and talked to us afterwards, and I got to know them. And it was Jason and Nick, who, you know, that those guys would be like the core of Marigold, along with this other guy, Scotty. Actually, I don't know. I don't remember if Scotty was there too. But somehow, once This Day Forward broken up, like either Jason reached out to me, or maybe I honestly don't remember. But somehow we started sending each other some ideas, and he had some pretty good ideas. He had a 4-track recorder, and he came over, and I put down some of my ideas on his 4-track recorder, and basically we just started playing. And we had there was a club in Trenton called the Conduit. I don't know if it's still there. It was kind of like a dance club upstairs, but downstairs they had 2 lockouts, and we had this one lockout there, and it was so convenient because we could literally go there whenever we wanted, like even at nighttime, because there's club music playing upstairs. So when we play, we could just practice, and the volume doesn't really matter. So we had written a lot. We started practicing like 2-3 nights a week, every week, you know, writing Marigold material. That's how that band started. And the only thing that I did before Marigold was I did a tour with Superstitions of the Sky that I had booked with a band called Dearly Departed. And then I went on tour with Hot Cross, like selling merch with Hot Cross and like Golden Sky. And then once I already had Marigold going, I was dating somebody in Long Island, and I ran into Fran from Autumn to Ashes at wherever, I forget, some show.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, hey, so I think it's not going to work out with our guitar player. Like, do you have any interest in playing? And, From Autumn to Ashes, honestly, like, musically isn't really my thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to do that. And he's like, well, we have a tour of Japan booked coming up. And I was like, all right, I'm in. So honestly, that's kind of like what sold me immediately, is because at that point I'd never been to Japan, like, let alone with the band. So I did a tour, like a US Canada tour with them, and then I did a Japan tour with From Autumn to Ashes in 2004 in the beginning of the year. And that was actually like a really cool experience, because the US Canada tour was on a bus, and that was the only tour to this day I've ever been on a bus.
Wow.
And it was just like interesting, to have that difference, as opposed to like being in a 15-passenger van my entire life. Like, every tour I've ever done has been in a 15-passenger van. So it was kind of like, it was crazy, like, to have like your own bunk and experience all that stuff. Like, the driver made us soup every day.
Wow.
This kind of thing, having people on the bus like afterwards, and just having like after parties or whatever. And then the Japan tour, that was my first time in Japan, like, in general, let alone playing music. But also, like, they had a huge infrastructure already with their label there. I mean, it was insane. It was like, I've never experienced anything like that in the United States ever, where like you get off the plane and there's already people waiting for you at the airport, like to take like photos or like have you sign shit, or they're waiting for you at the train stations, like, because they know which train you're going to take from one city to the other. I mean, it was
incredible.
Crazy. And all the shows were just completely packed. In fact, I was like that for every time I've played music in Japan. I've been to Japan 3 times now with 3 different bands, and it's always been like that. I played there with Makoto in 2009, and then I played there with Taken in 2010, and all of the shows are just like, people go off and they treat American musicians like royalty. And yeah, it's crazy. But also, that From Autumn to Ashes tour in Japan was with Anthrax too, so I could say I toured with Anthrax.
Wow.
Wow. And the other thing that was like, like looking back at it now, it kind of ties back into what you just mentioned before this, was I was still super gung-ho straight edge, right? And everyone in From Autumn to Ashes was not straight edge, I believe, except for their bass player, who sold out on the flight to Japan.
That's awesome.
He had like a glass of wine or something on the flight. I don't remember what it was. So then literally I was the only straight edge person in the whole crew, like, on this tour, right? And the first night, Scott Ian walks into our dressing room with a tray of shots. He's like, all right, guys, welcome to the tour. And then, of course, me being like stinker straight edge guy, like, I'm good. Like, yeah, like, sorry, I couldn't take a shot with Scotty in,
So here's something. When did you decide to try drinking? I don't even know that.
I think it was like 2007.
What? Really?
But I didn't really like it. Yeah, it was after I moved to California. I threw up really bad, really, really bad the first time.
Yeah.
It was like a pretty. I think we had the great idea of trying to mix vodka with Jamba Juice. So I think I had like two Jamba Juice flavored vodka drinks.
Yeah.
That ended up in my bathroom sink. And that was like the same day that George Carlin died. So if you look up the day that George Carlin died, because I remember like having the spins and then like having a bad experience and then like hearing, oh, by the way, George Carlin died. I was like, motherfucker.
That's a bad day. That's a fucking bad day.
I love George Carlin so much.
If you listen to him now, it's insane how on point he was like 20 years ago about like everything going on today. He's basically our philosopher now.
Yeah,
he's not even a comedian.
I still listen. I mean, I listen to George Carlin. I have a lot of George Carlin stuff on my iTunes, so I'll throw that on pretty frequently.
Vadim, June 22nd of 2008. That's when he passed.
Oh, there you go. So 2008 was when I first had some alcohol.
So we have the date of Vadim's Edge Break. Mark this in your calendars, folks.
Oh, no, wait. No. That's not Edge Break. Sorry. That's the first time I had alcohol.
Oh.
Yeah. Let's not get into other things.
We'll edit that out. Did From Autumn to Ashes ever ask you to join?
I don't think so. I think they were pretty respectful. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant in partying. No, I thought you meant partying with them, not the band. Yeah, I think it did get brought up. Not like, hey, do you want to join? Like, hey, do you want to do additional tours and kind of like see where it goes? It was talked about, but I had already had Marigold kind of going, even though it was just the first couple months and we hadn't done anything. I was pretty set on wanting to do my own project because I did get, like, when the word got out that This Day Forward was breaking up, I got asked to join a whole bunch of other bands.
Name some. I'm curious.
Well, like, okay, Ray talked to me about doing something with Taken. I think Shahlood had asked me to do stuff with them. Evergreen Terrace, I think, asked me to do stuff with them. There was a whole bunch. I don't remember all of them, honestly, but it was like probably 10 bands or so, and some of them, like, not like big bands or anything, but it felt nice to know that, I guess I'm respected enough as a musician, like, that people would want to play music with me.
Absolutely.
But I think I just had so many ideas that I wanted to pursue after This Day Forward broken up that I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to, like, join another band, because I basically did that with This Day Forward. I joined a band that wasn't mine from the beginning,
right?
And I wanted to do that again. I wanted to build something from the bottom up,
right? And that was my mindset as well when I did my record a couple years ago. I had joined plenty of bands. I had been a player in many bands. I was like, I want this to be mine. Like, I have to have my voice heard, and if I can't, I don't want to do it at all. So I understand. So Marigold, did you guys ever tour? Did you ever do like a U.S. tour? Or?
We did, yeah. We did a few, and I booked them also, so I went back to booking. So we did a full U.S. tour with In Pieces, and we actually shared a drummer with them. So that his name's TJ. Mad props to TJ, because he did 2 sets every night, back to back, and that's pretty impressive for drumming. Like, a lot of stamina goes into that. I really appreciate that. And then we did a tour with a band called Sleeper Set Sail in Canada, which was really nice. We went out to Eastern Canada, which I've only done twice in my life. We went out to New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and that was super, super cool. But other than that, Marigold mostly did a lot of regional shows. Like, when I say regional, you guys know, like, Philadelphia is so central. So we were able to do, like, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Baltimore, and New York, and New Jersey, and like all the states that are within, let's say, 5-hour driving distance, which is quite a bit. So we played a lot, mostly in the Northeast area.
Why did you leave the band? They went on without you, right, for a little while?
Yeah. So I just needed a change in my life. I've been asked often throughout the years why I moved to California, and I don't have like a concrete answer. It wasn't just like a one thing. But you know how sometimes people can relate to this. Sometimes you just do something because it feels right. You just have to follow like what your intuition is telling you that you need to do, what feels right in your life. And that felt right in my life. Like, I just wasn't entirely fulfilled in Pennsylvania, and I wanted some change in my life. I wanted to experience something new. And I've always loved Southern California, being out here on tour. Like, I was out here a lot. I had already had a bunch of people that I knew out here, some friends. So it just kind of something that made sense to do. And so my ex-girlfriend and I, we had talked about it. I mean, it wasn't like a on a whim type thing. Like, we sat down, we had a conversation about it, and then we gave ourselves 7 months planning time to do it, to save up, to make sure we had a place to move into. So I gave Marigold the heads up fairly early on. Like, those guys knew that I decided this, and they were not happy about it. I got this email that I've only read once. I've still never gone back and read it because it was so.
Why don't we go look it up and we can read it on the show right now?
Oh wait, just take a screenshot of it. We'll post it later.
Sure. So they were definitely not happy about me leaving the band, but maybe they can understand a little bit better now in hindsight. It wasn't anything to do with them. It just was something I needed to do for myself at the time in my life. And I'm really glad that I did, because I love my life in California. I love everything here. And it's like, it's been my home for almost 14 years now.
Yeah. Any chance of us ever getting you back to the East Coast, like to live?
I don't know. I mean, my mom always asked that. Probably not, to be honest with you. But I mean, you never know, I mean, like if there's a family emergency or something, I can see myself coming back. But I'm pretty happy with my life here in California.
I hear you. So on to more musical endeavors. Superstitions in the Sky. So that was before Marigold?
Yeah, so Superstitions of the Sky was another project that I kind of joined, because they had put out an EP. It was just Josh and this dude Kevin, who played drums in Joshua Fit for Battle. Both of those guys were in Joshua Fit for Battle. Josh and I were becoming really close for a long time. I used to go hang out with them for all the Neil Perry shows, all the Now shows. Like, he was in like 17 bands, you guys probably remember. He was in like... You're talking about dudes that were in a lot of bands. He was doing literally...
And he had that studio, Cannon Road, I think?
Yeah. So, dude, I remember, just quick aside, Mac Rock 2002, the Superstitions of the Sky played that. And for those of you that don't know, Mac Rock was like this big festival in I think it was Virginia.
Yes.
And that was the year Fugazi headline. And actually, that's the only time I've ever seen Fugazi. But Josh literally had 5 sets on that weekend, which was insane. He played with The Now, he played with Joshua Fit for Battle, he played with Neil Perry, he played with Hot Cross, and he played with Superstitions of the Sky. I mean, that's just insanity.
Wow.
He's a madman. But anyway, I took over for Kevin, and I just started going over to Josh's house, and we would practice. I think maybe with that project, he was pretty excited that I came from a choral background, because I was... I had so much experience with harmonization and this kind of thing, and we use that a lot in our songs, the songs that we wrote together. We would harmonize a lot, and I really enjoyed playing music with him. That was really fun. We only did one like actual tour together, and that was right after This Day Forward broke up in January of 2004. That was the only tour we ever did, but we did play a bunch of other regional shows, and we released one record together on One Day Savior Records, the same year that This Day Forward released In Response. So yeah, that was the same year that This Day Forward was still going that we did that.
Oh, so that was parallel. See, I didn't even know that. Okay.
It wasn't like a real band. That was just kind of like a side project thing, but it's cool that it exists as an artifact. You can find it somewhere. We did a music video that you can find on YouTube.
I Googled really, and I saw the whole record up on Robotic Empire, so now I can go back and do a deep dive into the discography of Vadim.
Watch the music video; it's pretty funny. If you YouTube Superstitions of the Sky, Who Needs Pennsylvania Anyway? That's the name of the song. We're like playing on some rooftop in Philadelphia, just being super emo, like. It's like the stereotypical like early 2000s emo music video, dude.
I love that.
It's like, the concept's like a guy and a girl and they lose each other, and it's just some stupid shit, but you don't watch it right now. Watch it.
So let's see. Now you did a tour with Colin, had his side project, Psychic Babble. So how did you get involved with that? I guess just your history, right?
Yeah, that was awesome. I think Colin just asked me if I was interested, because he was going to do this one tour in promotion for his solo project called Psychic Babble, like you said, which on the album he played everything. And he wanted to put together a band to open a tour for Anthony, and that was, that's actually a great idea, because you already have so much Circa involved. In fact, Brendan played in Anthony's backing band too. So, it was like you have 3/5 from Circa already on the tour. And Colin put together a group of dudes that he thought would make a good band. He kind of handpicked everybody. So Drew from Dredge played bass, and then Greg. Remember Greg Miles to Go? He's a Bucks County dude. He used to play in Silence Feels No Beauty. So, and Zoloff, and he played keyboards. This guy Ben played guitar, who's in a band called Black Map now. Super cool band. It's like members of Far and Dredge in that band also. So yeah, we just did one tour, and Colin was so awesome to work with because, okay, so speaking from experience, if I write something, let's say I write a song that's completely just me, and I put it together, I record it, I played all the parts or whatever. Maybe I remember how to play the parts, maybe I don't, but I wrote all these parts, so they exist, so here's the song as it is. Colin basically invited the musicians to come up with their own parts. Like, here's the song, but interpret it in the way that you see fit.
Wow.
That's it. So all the guys in Psychic Babble were just given the task of like, okay, here you go, figure these songs out, but you can figure them out however you want.
Wow.
Play them however you want. And then when we get together, like we'll see what works, what doesn't work or whatever. And for the most part, everything worked. And that was just like incredibly cool for him to do that because he gave everybody the freedom to play the songs how they want them to be played. And then also that translated differently live from the record. It became its own thing rather than just being a copy of what it sounds like on the album. And I remember for me especially being very thankful that he did that because I played in like really fucked up weird tunings. I used like all these like weird I think I had like 3 different guitars on that tour because I just kept like changing guitars out for different tunings and things like that. So that was a really, really fun tour to do. And especially because at that point I already wasn't really touring very much. That was probably my first one in like 3 years. Before that I went to Japan with Taken. So yeah, that was super fun to tour with Colin and Brennan and Anthony and the Good Old War guys, everyone on the same tour.
What was it like playing with Colin again after all those years? Was it just like old friends seeing each other again?
Well, yeah, but I've never been on a stage with Colin where he's not sitting at the drum kit,
Right.
So it was weird to have him be like in the front with us, but that was awesome. It was just so cool. He fit pretty naturally into that role. And we were, like for myself, cause I've been, a studio / touring musician so much now, I kind of realized my role is more to just sort of like let the music happen, be more in the background. Like I'm not like trying to put on a show like, hey, look at me. It's more like, here, this is Colin's thing, and I'm just gonna play it as well as possible so that it sounds good for everybody, and like Colin do his thing, because ultimately that's his project.
Yeah.
It's like all eyes are on him.
And that's a hard lesson to learn, especially coming out of the hardcore scene. My mindset used to be like, the more insane of a spectacle I make on stage, like the better it's going to be. And I did that in like many bands I was in, and you got to have some restraint. There's like just the right amount of finesse and showmanship to throw into it.
Yeah, I definitely stepped back more and was the background guy, which honestly, for the most part, that's my role that I prefer.
Yeah. So you're touring with Poison the Well now. Now let's talk about that. How did that come about?
All right, so Chris moved out here about 10 years ago. Chris is the drummer. And I ran into him at a show at Chain Reaction. I think it was a Converge show also. And so we had known each other for like 20 years. Well, at that point, it was less than that. But we met in 1999. Poison the Well used to come up and they would play Pennsylvania all the time, as you remember. They stayed at the Shaws all the time.
Yep.
So I knew those guys going way back. Now, Derek, the original guitar player that was in Poison the Well for the first 3 albums, he's been doing a group called Sleigh Bells for a while now. So he doesn't really have too much time. So Poison the Well, they don't really have like a second guitar player, at least a consistent one, So in 2016, they were going to do some shows, and Chris just asked me, he's like, hey, would you have any interest in doing Poison the Well? And I was like, yeah, of course, that'd be really fun. And so the rest of the band, they had to kind of make sure, I think they had to screen me, because they knew me, but they didn't know me like as a musician, I guess. And so I had to make like a couple videos of myself playing some of their songs, like in what I think they're playing, because at that point I didn't really know if I was playing it exactly right. And I think, I passed the screening process. So then in 2016, we played a bunch of shows all over, and that was really unique situation for me because we just flew from show to show. It was like, and there were 3 sets of shows. So there was like New York, Toronto, and this festival called Rockfest in Montreal, which, by the way, was with Limp Bizkit and Insane Clown Posse. And so my life is complete now that I've played with Insane Clown Posse. I always said I should have just retired like right after that.
That's amazing.
Because ultimately, that's the number one goal, is to play with Insane Clown Posse.
Do you think you'll get on the Gathering of the Juggalos ever?
Maybe. I do want to tell this story really quick. That's really interesting. So when we were done playing at the Rockfest in Canada and we were at the airport, we were flying back to Los Angeles, I think I spotted like Dave Navarro or something because Jane's Addiction had played, and I was like, oh yeah, of course, like people flying back to wherever they're from, but we're flying to Los Angeles, and so I board the flight. And in first class, I see Perry Farrell sitting next to Dee Snider. So, Jane's Addiction and Twisted Sister both had played the festival. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy. But then, as I'm walking through the back of the plane where we're sitting, I see like there's members of NoFX. Like I'm sitting next to the drummer of NoFX. Then there's like dudes from Lagwagon, dudes from Strung Out, dudes from Korn, all these bands. And we're just on a flight, like all these degenerate rock people, and then just regular families and their kids. Just like such a great rock and roll moment. And then we did South Florida and Chicago. So and then we did 3 California shows. So that was in 2016. And then there was no communication for a long time because everyone kind of has their own stuff going on in Poison the Well. Everyone's spread out across the country. There were 2 guys in Florida, 1 guy in Chicago, and then me and Chris are in California. Now there's 3 guys in California. Ryan moved. So in 2020, when it had come up again, I got a phone call, and Chris just said, hey, so, or maybe it was late 2019. He called me and said, hey, so we're going to be doing Opposite of December stuff. And are you interested? And I was like, well, hell yeah, because that's, that's the record that if you're a Poison the Well fan, that's the unanimous album that like everybody likes, regardless of if you stayed with them throughout the years. Everyone liked Opposite of December. So I was like, okay, I know those shows are going to be awesome.
Yeah.
And there was always a question of maybe Derek hopping back in to do something, which obviously like 100% yes. Like if that came up, like, I'm not going to argue with anything like that. Like he's like he's their guy who was in the band. I'm just like your fill-in guy. So there was the potential of me doing, because it was 2 sets. It was like a set of just Opposite of December and then a set of like all the other songs throughout the career. And so I was going to play maybe all the other songs, and then Derek was going to hop on and do Opposite of December, but ended up where he couldn't do it, and so I did all of them. But now there's all this other stuff planned for this year, and they had asked me if I want to continue. So it's pretty cool because I guess like I wouldn't know if they would ask me again to play every time they do shows, but it has been the case. It seems that I'm now sort of like their go-to guy, and I'm not in the band. I'm just like a hired guy type role situation, which I know is weird to hear from like a hardcore background, but honestly, like it's totally fine. I just show up, I play the songs, I hang out with the guys, we all get along really well, and it's a great situation to be in.
That's awesome. How does that work? Do you get like a flat rate per show or something?
Yeah. They kind of they tell me like, hey, this is what we can pay you, and it's like I've never like negotiated or anything like that. Like I'm just like, yeah, that's fine, like I'm down to play. The last show, the Opposite of December show we did at the El Rey in January, I really wish there was more than one show, only because like I put in so much time prepping for that show, between just home rehearsal and then I think we did like 10 rehearsals with the band, and it started with just Chris and I, and then it was like me, Chris, and Ryan, and then like like the bass player Brad and the singer flew in like a few days leading up to the show, and then we did 3 practices on the stage of the venue. So we were like getting dialed in for the sound for the show itself. So there was like so much prep that went into it. It would have been cool like to do a second one, but we have all this other stuff planned for 2020. So hopefully we get to play it with everything that's happening in the world now, and we'll see if it gets canceled or not.
Yeah. So how are you able to so quickly jump into these bands and learn all this stuff? Like I have this recurring nightmare where I'm at a show and they're like, we need you to play the set now. And I'm like, oh shit, like I don't know how, I don't know what I'm doing. But this is your life, you do it. Are you like classically trained in music, or do you have like a masterful ear, or both? Like how are you able to do it?
I've had that dream too, by the way, Keith. I've even had it with This Day Forward reunion, where like, oh, with This Day Forward, we have a reunion, and then I'm standing on the stage and I'm supposed to start like White Picket Defense System or something, and I just don't remember what I'm supposed to play.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, fuck, this is the worst. Well, I'm not classically trained. I do have a lot of music theory background. I grew up singing in the Philadelphia Boys Choir. I played in all the school like concert bands and jazz band and orchestras. And I studied music theory in high school. I didn't do it in college or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I've tried to be well-rounded in terms of like understanding what it is I'm actually doing, as opposed to like, oh, play the power chord on 5th fret here.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, well that power chord is actually like an A5. It doesn't have its third in it, and doesn't have its third in it, which allows it to be a major or a minor chord. Like those kinds of things. Like and it's really helpful for speaking to other musicians that also have a musical theory background. So I found I play best with people that I can communicate with musically easier. But as far as you said stepping in quickly into these roles, it's not as quick as you think. I mean, I'm a learner the best through repetition, and so I practice the shit out of these songs. It's not like I go in there and I'm like, oh, I got them all in like 5 seconds. Like I really take the time and practice them over and over and over and over again, so that it's more like muscle memory, because then when you're on the stage, you can more concentrate on enjoying the experience rather than constantly thinking about like which part is next or something like that.
Right.
It's always been a lot of planning, a lot of preparation.
So now you mentioned a This Day Forward reunion. Let's talk about that. Now
I didn't mention. Oh, in my dream.
In your dream. Since you brought it up.
Did he mention it?
Mike. Now in Mike Shaw's episode, he wants to will a Equal Vision Fest into existence, where a bunch of Equal Vision bands, past and present, would play, and then This Day Forward would potentially play that show. But let's hear your side of this. Has there been talk of a reunion, and do you think there ever will be?
The juiciness. This is what you've been waiting for, huh?
Yes.
There has been talk, but there's been talk throughout the years. It's just, it's getting everybody on board. I think before this happened, this meaning the coronavirus, it did seem that there was more talk than ever. I don't want to get anybody excited or anything, but it seemed like it could be a possibility at some point, but the obstacles have always been the same, and the obstacles will always be the same, which is Mike hasn't screamed. He doesn't have that voice that he once had. And truthfully, I don't know, I can't speak for him, but I don't know if he can get that voice back. And he'll be the first to say it too. Like if he tries to scream, like he'll lose his voice, he'll get hoarse or whatever. And it's also not really him, which I completely understand, like 100%. So to play a lot of that This Day Forward material where Mike can scream is difficult, because that takes out that aggressive element of the band, which a lot of people were attracted to initially,
Mm-hmm.
And then the other large obstacle, which I think is the biggest one, is Colin hasn't played drums. So he was the drummer in This Day Forward, and since Circus Survive, he's been a guitar player. He played drums on an early Circus Survive demo that I have, and that's literally, I think, the last thing that he played. Oh no, I guess he maybe did some drums for the Psychic Babble record, but he doesn't have a drum set. He doesn't have a space to practice drums. He needs to build up his endurance, let alone like remembering the music. So for him, it's going to take like at least a month or two preparation on top of practicing with us. It's going to be much more work for him, and probably costly for him as well. Plus, like, if we did a show in Pennsylvania or on the East Coast, like we have to rent everything because he doesn't have his own kit. You have to, So there's a lot of things like that, but all in all, I think that people are interested in doing it. It just has to be under the right circumstances, and we need to have the right amount of time to do it properly.
I think it's just not time yet. I think it will happen eventually, but it just has to be the perfect timing. And yes, Colin's going to have to relearn the drums, and I told Mike he just needs to, it'll just have to be like a Rocky training montage where he's doing like cardio and running up mountains, and I have faith he will be able to get where he once was. He told me he sang one of the songs like at full volume. He was by himself somewhere, and that he got it. So I think it's just, you got to like get back into it.
Well, you're the trainer here, right?
Yeah.
Aren't you?
This is my undertaking.
You're the Apollo here. Like, you need to get this shit going, Keith.
I am. I'm gonna be running with him on the beach, and then we're gonna jump in the air and hug each other. And then Mike will be like, tomorrow, and I'll be like, there is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow. Like, it's.
And then it goes right into For the Love of Song, right?
I hope so. Please cover it. It's gonna happen. Well, Vadim, this has been awesome. I was really looking forward to this interview. Is there anything else? Is there anything you want to close with, or something we didn't talk about that you want to mention?
Is that okay? I do want to bring up one thing. So I didn't really want to talk about the coronavirus. I wanted to kind of keep it out of the interview, get people's minds away from everything that's happening. But I will just mention it for a second because it's given me a lot more time at home, and the way that I'm coping with this, or the way that I guess I'm helping pass time, is by doing music. So I just dove really, really, really heavily into music. I put out a feeler online about doing collaborations, and I want to extend that to the listeners. If anybody is interested in doing any sort of collaboration with me, I'm open to all styles of music. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I can sing. My weaknesses are drum programming and writing lyrics. Those are my weaknesses. But if anybody wants to try to do a collaboration project, please get in touch with me. And that, of course, includes the two of you. Hint, hint.
Hey,
hint, hint.
I was thinking about that. There's a couple Basement Year songs that I just never got to do anything with, and I think I definitely am going to be in touch with you. We'll make a B-side one of our own.
Yeah, please do. So if anyone that's listening is interested, you can contact me on my Facebook or my Instagram.
And I see Tommy flipping the camera to some guitars there. Tommy, do you have something you're going to collaborate on Vadim with as well?
I have guitars, and I have my daughter's keyboard with all the notation written down on it.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I have stuff still.
You got some grandpa guitars.
It's funny when you were mentioning it before. You were like, "Oh yeah, like after I was done music, I was like, all right, I really want to like keep doing music." And I had like the exact opposite. Like as soon as I was done music, I was like, "All right, so that's done. Let's not do that anymore."
Dude, right now I literally have 10 projects that are open with random people from all over the place, and it's just so awesome because it's giving me a good perspective on like where people are mentally, and then a couple times now I've returned things to people that they've given me, like stuff that I've built, and they're just like, this is why I love music so much, because I heard something one way and then what you did with it just took it somewhere completely different. And that's kind of like what I want to get out of it. I want to push musicians out of their comfort zones. I want to push myself as a musician to do things I've never done before, and also just to have fun and to be able to have an artifact from this time. A lot of people are just like watching TV and playing video games, and it's like, well, at least I'm doing something where I'm going to be look back on this 10 years and be like, oh, look at all this crazy stuff that I created during this time, or that I helped create. So that's kind of my intention with it. That's why I'm doing it. That's all. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did, because that's kind of the whole mission statement of this whole thing that we're doing, is to catalog some of the memories of the past and new memories as well. We still go to shows. We're still writing music in some sense, and we just want a place for everybody to connect now like we did back in the day.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the interview, guys. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
There you have it, folks. The Vadim Taver interview. We hope you enjoyed it. Please reach out to us, northeastscene@gmail.com, or we are on Instagram and Twitter, the NE Scene. Reach out to us, share your stories, share your experiences, tell people about the podcast, listen to the podcast, and stay safe out there. Stay indoors. Thank you, and until next time.